Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we're going week to week, watching something on a popular streamer, providing context and some recommendations along the way. In today's episode, we're discussing the 8th episode of HBO Max's The Pitt. Season 2 continues to be very popular, although apparently not as popular as The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which just wrapped up last week. An excellent and very short season of TV. If you haven't caught up with that, do check it out. And I will be discussing the finale with Darren, who's back from vacation, in one of our upcoming episodes. Darren and I have to talk about that season finale, get his final thoughts about that. But of course, Industry is wrapping up this week, and we'll have our conversation about the finale of that series. DTF St. Louis is premiering the next big HBO Max series, or HBO series, I should say. Lots of news about HBO this week, of course, with this merger with Paramount potentially. And Sona is back on the podcast to discuss that with me. And Paradise, we had a very popular first episode discussion about the first 3 episodes of Paradise. Alan helpfully sitting in for Darren. And somehow, Darren and I will be discussing that show as well in this very abbreviated time frame. I'm not sure when those episodes are going to be coming out, to be honest. I may very well have to publish an episode about DTF St. Louis and a separate episode about the Industry finale, and maybe another episode on the 4th episode of Paradise. And you guys will just have to pick and choose which ones you guys want to listen to, because they are all coming out between Sunday night and Monday morning. So it's going to be complicated, but things will get easier as we go forward with those series. And of course, we will be continuing to cover The Pitt through the rest of the season. If you'd like to reach out to us, need some introduction at gmail.com, or post a comment on any episode via Spotify or via YouTube. If you'd like to support the show, give us a review or rate us on your podcatcher of choice, or recommend us to your friends and family. That's how we've grown the podcast up to this point. And we hear from you all over the world. So exciting to hear how far this little podcast has spread. So thanks for listening, and enjoy all that upcoming coverage. And let's get into the conversation. Kim and I discussing this mid-season episode of The Pitt. Oh, and of course, discussing Drops of God, something else we'll be covering for the next couple of weeks until this season wraps up as well. Enjoy the conversation. All right, Kim. So let's spend just a few minutes today, legitimately, on Drops of God, which this is obviously what the whole season's been leading up to. So it's packed with incident, but pretty straightforward as far as like any kind of analysis. But I think we just keep seeing that Camille is truly her father's daughter.
Exactly. Being a little manipulative for her own benefit.
So what do we foresee here? We're going to see this competition, and she has indeed gotten this Spanish...
Georgian.
The Spanish winemaker to swap out his wine.
To swap it for the Georgian wine, yes.
And this is pretty messed up, to say the least.
It is messed up. She is determined to get them to win the competition so that the vineyard can keep making their wine. So I think, yes, this is fairly predictable. We are presuming now that this Georgian wine is going to win, and then we're going to create some massive family drama back in Georgia.
And that she's already texted David at the end of the episode. And I'm sure this is going to put a lot of strain on her relationship with Tomas also. Not only that, his dad is so proud of this wine and gets to compete this year and probably wouldn't have won, just based on probably 12 equally matched wines, and maybe some kind of antagonism towards her having inherited $100 million and giving her some kind of advantage. I'm just trying to play this out in the real world and imagine people not actually giving them the award because they're like, well, he already is married. He's going to marry this 100 millionaire. So that's just how I'm playing it out in my mind. But nonetheless, he's going to have to look at her and be like, look, you weren't here during the setup for the competition. You weren't here to do the interviews. You're not helping my dad with this vineyard because you're rich and you're loaded. And so nothing matters to you. And you're being just like your dad. And I have to assume this is going to be very, very bad for her relationship.
Yeah, Tomas is already upset when she comes in and tries to steal his thunder after he's serving the wine that he is presenting in the competition. She's like, well, try this. So he's mad. Now he's going to get even more mad. Their relationship is then going to be strained. And she's all doing this for what?
Just to get involved in someone else's business.
Exactly. Camille, get your act together.
But it's really because she's like, we have to save this wine. Which, by the way, everybody says that when they drink this wine. So that might be the case. I
desperately want to drink this wine. And I would love to have the experience of being transported to another place when I have one sip of wine. That doesn't usually happen to me.
It's hilarious.
I just wish.
We see this Italian cousin of this villain from last season who shows up here, and his girlfriend, this Japanese waitress. So we haven't seen them all season long. So here they pop up. Or maybe they were at the very, very beginning of the season, but now they're back here in France. And they have that experience too, like, we must save this wine. So I do think this is almost comedic that this wine is so transformational that if anyone drinks it, that it just seems silly. But I guess that's the setup for the show, right? That it's the kind of magic realism of the show.
Yeah, the only way to have that sort of experience with wine is to like be on drugs or something.
Take LSD.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. Put some LSD.
Some ecstasy, then drink this wine and you're like, my God, it's great.
So all the winemakers out there, just sneak some psilocybin or something into your wine.
Not psilocybin. That's going to knock you out.
I don't know. Some psychedelic.
Anyway, that's our recommendation, everybody.
Pair your psychedelics.
Pair your wine and your psychedelics
together. So, we'll see what happens next week. I predict that Tomas slaps right across the face in the middle of the competition.
No.
You don't think so?
No.
That's what I would do.
No. Great. Love you too, Victor.
But that's for Camille, I mean, of course.
Yes. Well, Tomas is not as mean as you are.
Oh, man. All right. Let's talk about the Pitt. Hour 8. Here we are.
Here we are.
Past midpoint of the season. I guess this is the midpoint episode. And it really feels like that. Like they're kind of setting the table. They've now introduced the big, just from a story structure standpoint, we have the big crises that's going to be dealt with over the course of the season. But it is surprisingly, given like oh my God, all the computers got turned off, is a pretty quiet episode of the show, right? I mean, even like from the point of their caseload is pretty light.
There's no disasters happening. They're just trying to figure out how to manage their lack of electronic anything.
Oh, before we get into this week's episode, I had notes, things that I wanted to talk about from last week that we forgot to mention because, it's a pretty packed episode last week. But a few things. One was we didn't even mention this really gnarly propeller victim. Again, people, do not go mess with the propeller when you're drunk on the 4th of July, but I guess a lot of people make very bad decisions on the 4th of July.
Yeah, there's always the people who are putting their hands in lawnmowers, snow blowers, and then, propellers, that's another thing. But yeah, just bad decision making.
I didn't bring it up because it was not one of those cases that carries over from season, or I should say from episode to episode. But I did think it was interesting to include, but to mention it here for the fact that I think the point of this case was to show that this is a really bad trauma to the body, but everybody's just like, surgery doesn't have to get involved. It looks like you didn't hit anything arterial. So it's like this horrible wound, which is just like, I guess it's going to heal on its own.
No, they do take the patient upstairs to the OR to repair.
To close it.
Yeah, repair it.
But yeah, given that what it looks like is surprisingly...
Just graze the ribs and the side of the chest.
Another really gross thing that we, again, kind of missed the grossest points. Maybe I missed that paragraph in my notes. But the other really gross thing, of course, was when Abbott shows up with his SWAT team and the guy, they're not getting oxygen into this guy's lungs anymore. And it turns out the trach tube has popped out through
the hole in his neck. His trachea is like literally exposed. So they end up intubating the trachea, and you actually see it popping through the skin, and they intubate him that way. That looked really realistic.
This is quite an advancement over ER special effects back in the day, right?
Oh yeah, this looked definitely legit.
And one last thing I forgot to mention: the last episode was so much about Santos. Obviously, this whole entire season has been developing her a little bit in every episode, but last episode specifically, giving her all these different, falling asleep on the job and being yelled at for using the AI tools and not checking, but her having her issues with this ASL, this deaf patient, Harlow is her name. And then on top of all that then she has to go and quiet this baby down. I love, by the way, the reaction of like, will someone make that baby stop crying? And everybody's just walking around like, what are you talking about? Anyone who's a parent is just like, yeah, babies cry. That's what happens. But she doesn't have kids of her own. So she goes in there and we hear her sing very beautifully to this little baby. She's the baby whisperer.
She just needs to learn how to properly swaddle a baby because this poor kid is just flailing. So I'll teach her that someday.
How do people not know to swaddle the baby? That's a pretty straightforward thing.
She finally puts the blanket over the baby. I'm like, thank God, this kid might be cold. The ER is cold.
If they actually swaddled the baby with a swaddle, the baby's probably slept through this whole thing.
We used to swaddle our baby with a blanket.
With a blanket, yeah. That's all you need.
They have a blanket. For God's sake, swaddle the kid.
Figure it out, people. Oh, and of course, the very last note on my notes last week that I forgot to mention, but comes back this week. I just want to bring it up and put a pin in it because it comes up again. This is the third or fourth time we've heard about this, which is, where is Robbie's friend Duke? Where could he be? Oh. Has he shown up yet? Where is he?
He's the next trauma victim, which is what you predicted before.
Yep. So this is inevitably going to happen. And they bring it up again this week. So if not this...
Just to remind us.
Yes, exactly.
Something
bad happened to Duke. And maybe this will change Robbie's mind about going on that trip. I was actually predicting that Robbie's going to come in on a gurney early at the very beginning of the season.
I can't accept that. I don't like that idea.
Well, I mean, I think at this point, it's pretty clear that Duke is going to come in with a really bad head trauma, maybe even die. And then Robbie's not just going to be like, I'm going to go drive around without a helmet on. I think it's going to be kind of a wake-up call for him.
Yeah, they've been alluding to this no helmet situation, so it's a clue.
I just thought another thing too is, imagine Duke shows up and everyone's like, he's dead, and then he saves Duke's life. And then not only is that going to make him second guess his trip, but is that going to make him be like, if I wasn't here on call today, who would have saved Duke? I need to not take the sabbatical so I can save more lives.
Perhaps.
Anyway, all predictions for possible outcomes in the future. The big storyline, of course, this week is they are going analog. And when I was sitting, we watched this together. We don't always watch together, but we actually watched this in real time together. And you're like, that's how I used to do medicine.
I know, I'm not that old, but when I started, I graduated from PA school 20 years ago. So on my rotations, we had no electronic records. We would handwrite orders, put them on a rack for the nurses to pick up. And it was just so laborious compared to how we do things now. I was actually talking to a nurse on the step-down floor yesterday, and she said that she had previously worked in Boston when they had a cyber attack. So they went offline for a length of time. I don't think it was more than 24 hours. But she's like, the residents were completely incapacitated. The nurses are like, here's what you have to do. Here's how you have to write the orders. I have to be able to read your handwriting. Can you imagine? And they were just like, what? So yeah, pretty disabling.
So some of the analog stuff, the calls come in on the phone, which this is funny to see it this way because I did not watch ER, but you did. And first of all, question for you in ER. I assume this is not the case, but this show is maybe, I mean, as unrealistic as it often is, like we touched on some of the things of the way that this ER would never be laid out this way and one doctor would not be in charge of all these cases, et cetera. But as unrealistic as aspects of this are, in ER, would you ever have this amount of time of like doctors doing their notes and waiting for tests in real time and like seeing how long it might take to get a translator there? It's, from me watching, not ER, which I didn't really watch, but like watching House, everything there is just like magic. It's like the blood results are back. Here's the specialist on whatever thing you wanted to do. We had that, we broke into literally on House. We broke into the guy's house and then we swabbed his kitchen and we found anthrax or whatever it was, right? It was like this kind of magic. Everything's magic. Here, it's like one of the key subtexts here is like the doctors have to make a decision and they don't have time to wait for the CT scan. They don't have time to wait for the test result, right? Like it's like this person is dying and they're like, yeah, send it to the labs. Sure, let me just send that up while the patient drops dead on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any medical context when I watched ER. I was like in high school. So I guess going forward, as I became more involved in the medical profession, I did, but I don't remember them focusing on that sort of stuff. Like they focused on the character development and, the medical cases, but not so much on the logistics of it that I remember. But.
Yeah, and from my memory of it, once again, I never really watched it closely, but it would be on, like if I was watching Seinfeld, I would watch it in passing, and it was a formula. But yeah, it seemed to be much more that like there's this case of the week. There might be other cases going on or some kind of catastrophe going on in the ER, but most of the time it's like kind of the case of the week, the character development around that, and you're not seeing all the behind the scenes, like all the stuff that kind of was so powerful about the episode. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, maybe last week, the one with that focused on nursing, of like how this system works, propped up by all the kind of small people. It really was more of that traditional, the doctor comes in and saves the day. So other things that happen here, we have printouts for everything. The fax machine is plugged in again, which the funny thing about it is I don't think, like in this particular case, they're like, oh my God, fax machine, those things still exist. I'm pretty sure like when I go to a doctor's office, and I don't mean like going to the ER, when I just go to the doctor's office, they are faxing back and forth all the time.
Yes, we still have fax machines on every floor of the hospital, so they're not that foreign of a concept. People have to still use them, which makes me crazy every single time. I'm like, do I dial 9 and then 1 to use this machine? Please, people, we just need to be electronic.
And you had speculated on the fact that how would they even get their meds? But we did kind of what I had presupposed. They do have someone come down there and like, they have a pharmacist there and they're like, I've unlocked the machine and I'm going to hand you the drugs.
Yeah, which is how they used to do it. Nowadays, you have to log into the Pyxis. You have to put the patient information in there in order to get the medication you need. Now we have drugs available to everyone who wants to grab them. So hopefully nothing bad happens with unlimited Pyxis access.
Yeah, although once again, they do seem to have somebody there. She's like, I'm here to help you. So I assume that they'll need to come there with a prescription and then she'll fill the prescription. Although you can write your prescriptions.
The ER. You're going to write, like, I need Zofran. So the nurse is going to say, oh, going to get Zofran and check the box that I did that. There's no other record of it.
That's a good point. So, I mean, is this going to be a temptation for Langdon, for example?
Yeah, it better not be.
Some of the more analog things here that I thought were very funny. Is this thing for real? I mean, have you ever seen this before? I mean, I'm sure it is for real, but I wonder if you've ever seen it before. This really funny cartoon where they have the two body parts, and like depending on what part you're diagnosing, you pull the sheet out closest to that body part, and then it has all the differentials on it, and then you circle the ones that you identified and you cross out the ones that you removed, which is so funny. But just like this cartoon cutout of these people, that this is how you use this. I'm starting at the head, I'm working my way down.
Yeah, I haven't used anything like that, but I have seen cartoon-like things that are similar to that based on body system. So that's not too far off.
Yeah, about this, it's similar, but I just love this visual. I'm like, what? All right, so let's start off with some of these patients, which is pretty much the focus of the show anyway, cleaning things up and honestly probably removing a lot of these cases that are still lingering from the plot as we move forward. And let's start with that patient, Harlow, the ASL patient. I was so irritated watching this storyline, maybe just because, first of all, in the structure of the show, it seems like the story is dragged on for so long. She's been there from the very, very first episode, and seems to be very little payoff here for her to have a headache. But more than that, I was irritated by the fact that, and maybe this is intentional, maybe this is what the show is trying to say, but that how could it take so long for Santos to understand she has this headache and, to make this diagnosis, because she was waiting. And I guess this is maybe the point that the show is trying to make. You're so reliant on technology. You have a solution. And the technology here is actually another person, potentially this actual translator. But it's still the fact that you could talk to the patient. You could have them write down on a piece of paper while they've been there for hours waiting for someone to talk to them. You already know she's been there for hours because she's ASL and has not heard her announcement. And then instead of bring her back there and immediately having somebody who has some information, or you can imagine like Princess, who knows a little bit of ASL, and just say, write this all down. And then Santos could read what she wrote and then have follow-up questions, which would be pretty simple, like yes or no type questions. The fact that this took so long for me is frustrating.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit too drawn out, because this woman who's been sitting in the waiting room for God knows how long could have just written a narrative of her symptoms. She has not suddenly lost her ability to hear.
Perfect.
Like, she's functioning in the world. So she could have written the whole thing down. She could have typed it on her computer, which is apparently what's causing her neck pain. She has a tension headache. All this play up to a muscular headache. A little bit crazy. But yes, I communicate with patients, as I mentioned last week on our episode. I have patients who've had strokes who have a hard time communicating, but some of them are able to write. So you're just like, here you go. Here's a pen and paper. So yeah, a little too drawn out for not much payoff.
And I think part of that is a critique of technology. But speaking of technology, we had this overweight patient who is intubated, who is able to, I think this is a little exaggerated too, is immediately able to communicate in full sentences using this touchscreen. Again, why wasn't this given as an option when they have 8 doctors and this touchpad available for this guy? Why is this not available to the ASL patient?
Good point, Victor. Also, a little bit crazy is they have to do a nasotracheal intubation.
Very cool, actually.
So that they can lay him flat, so that they can weigh him. Meanwhile, most hospital beds, you can get a body weight with the patient in the bed without changing their body position and having to intubate them. And this guy, who is obviously obese, weighs more than what the CAT scan can allow, which is a true statement. Scans and OR tables in different parts of the OR only take up to 450 pounds. So we have sent patients to the zoo in real life to, be able to get treatment they need if they cannot fit on the CAT scan.
It's interesting that Ogilvy, who obviously has a fat bias, and I'm curious to say if that's something you do see in medicine as well, that he makes that statement. What do we do then? Send them to the zoo? And people, even the older doctors, are shocked by him saying this. And he's like, no, they have a bigger CT scanner there.
Exactly. That's legit. We've sent patients to the Bronx Zoo.
Wow. Pretty crazy. And then I was wondering very specifically if there is, I've heard about this, that there is a bias in medicine against obese patients. And part of that, I do wonder, obviously there is probably a cultural bias, unfortunately, against the obese. But also I think that, like all the things they described here, an obese patient can be more problematic. They're talking about giving him they're afraid that something has happened in his intestines. And they're like, it's a 50% chance of death potentially doing this procedure on him because of his obesity. I don't know if that's a realistic statistic.
They have no diagnosis. So that's
a guesswork. Of course, at that point. But I think the show is intentionally telling us that, in the fact that obviously part of the bias here is that if a doctor has to do a pretty standard procedure, that could potentially kill the patient and all the complications that come with the obesity, that of course it ingrains a bias in the doctor.
Yeah, it's definitely a true statement that doing surgery on obese patients is exponentially more complicated than patients who are not obese. We see there's, in vascular surgery, we see more groin infections, wound healing problems, et cetera. So it does make it much more strenuous on the surgeon and the patient.
But of course, maybe the main reason here, because we do know that almost all these cases, part of the reason they have them here is so that we can see something pretty cool being done, either something you never thought about before, or just showing like, this is not cool, by the way, that what I'm about to say, but even just seeing how complicated doing a rape kit is and going into it in very granular detail, which I'm a big fan of that. Again, it's like part of the reason I like heist movies and stuff like that, is to see somebody proficient at somebody doing something in great detail. Here, of course, not the thrill of a heist, but just the reality in the real world, that things that we think it's just something you hear. And then she had a rape kit, and then the actual tedious, complicated process, and then it has to get picked up, and then it turns out it's not picked up. We can have a whole digression on that specific topic. But all that is to say that part of the pleasure of watching the show is in understanding these things in much more detail. But sometimes it's just a very cool, I didn't know they did that. And it is him getting what do they call it? The
nasotracheal intubation. They put the breathing tube in through his nose.
And I loved seeing it. Like you actually see it going through the vocal cords, and then like it's at the lungs. It has to go left or right. I was like, oh, wow, how cool is that?
I'm glad you were entertained by that.
I've never seen that before. It's pretty cool. So so let's talk about I thought the rape story might have been ended, but then we actually she did come back. She did complete her exam from Dana. And of course we see Dana furious when she realizes that the old rape kits that had been put into
it's like a locked refrigerator or something. She opens it and she sees a kit from 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And she's very upset because they have to be picked up within 72 hours to process the sample. So that previous kit that's in there is now worth nothing because you may be able to not run those tests anymore.
The crazy thing about that too, by the way, it's such infuriating thing when you think about it in any detail, but how difficult it is to even get a rape kit done, and how time consuming it is, and having someone with the patience and the patient themselves having the tolerance for it, and having to have this conversation about this thing that just happened to them. So all of that. And then for the kids in this particular case, and I'm curious actual statistics, whether they are actually picked up by the police or not. But anybody who listens to those cold cases or watch these real true crime documentaries where all of a sudden someone processed a rape kit and they identified that the person in jail was not the actual perpetrator because of a DNA match or mismatch, or vice versa, where they find out this is like a serial rapist. And then the statistics, oftentimes when you hear those things, that only a small percentage of the rape kits themselves are ever processed at all. So you're like, man, this process is just completely broken.
Yeah, if this woman decides not to pursue charges, I don't know what happens to that kit. I would assume they would still have to process it. So they have the data if the data is to be needed. I'm just not sure.
I don't think they do process it. Because I think it's only a small fraction of actual rape kits are ever DNA processed.
Interesting. You have a very short time to make a decision about whether or not your samples are processed. Wild.
Yeah, all of it's problematic to say the least. All right, let's talk about this cancer patient too. Her parents show up. So that's another key point here. So we meet her parents for the first time. She seems to have this loving family. Now her whole family's there. The kids are going out for ice cream with the grandparents. I like that question. They're like, can she have ice cream? And they're like, she can have anything she wants. I mean, she's really just there in hospice at this point.
Yeah.
But interesting, the one interesting point here is when Robbie's saying, well, if she's not responding to her pain meds, you have to give her more pain meds. And they're like, what? She's already on this long acting opioid. Mm-hmm. What about this? He calls it double effect. And he goes, well, the double effect, they ask him what that means. And I guess maybe you have context about that. But it's like he's basically saying that, hey, the double effect is we're treating her pain. And if she dies, well.
Yeah, I mean, if patients are near end of life, you can put them on a morphine drip, knowing that over time, their respirations will slow down and the morphine will make them comfortable. And yes, you can increase the morphine to augment this respiratory depression if someone is dying.
Another one of these like quick check-ins, a new case, which this woman who has a sudden blindness. I was really shocked by this. Personally, I don't think I would make this choice, but Mohan mentions that if they treat it with this medication very quickly, that it could recover, I think it was about 20% or so, get full vision recovery, and about another 20% get partial recovery. And it's just a 1% chance of death. Like 1% chance of death, which seems like a small number, not that small a number. Like, I'm not sure I'm going to give myself a 1 in 100 chance of death to have partial vision recovery in one eye.
Yeah, they offer her TPA, which is a drug that's used commonly for patients who have stroke. If you get to them within a certain time frame, you can administer TPA to break up the clot that's causing the stroke, which can potentially save a patient from becoming severely debilitated. So if you have your speech is disrupted, you have numbness, weakness, hemiparesis, you can't move half your body, and the symptoms started within a few hours, that is the medication that they give to bust up the clot. So it's the same idea with retinal artery occlusion. You have a clot in your retinal artery, so the TPA can break that up and restore vision. There are side effects to that. Having a blindness in one eye is certainly severely debilitating. So accepting the 1% risk of a fatal bleed is what it is. I would personally accept that.
1%?
Yeah, 1%. I'm not like an 80-year-old with a atrophied brain that has an increased risk of bleeding in my brain. As a 40-year-old person, and not that would, a retinal artery occlusion generally doesn't happen to people who are 40. So we're talking people who are a little bit older. So the risk of complications from TPA increases with age. But yeah, I don't want to be blind.
All right. It's only one eye, though, I have to say. And I would I guess that's depending on how much risk you want to take. For me, if they're like, you can have a 1% chance of death, but you're going to be paralyzed severely, and there's opportunity for improvement. But I don't know, it seems heavy it seems hard for me between the 1% chance versus, this is where I factor these things in. There's a 1% chance of death versus not a 100% chance of sight recovery, a 37% chance of partial sight recovery versus not treating it where you don't have a 0% chance of sight recovery. You still have so my point is going from like the 15% chance of partial to 30% partial, and all you have to take is a 1% chance of death. I'm like, I don't know if I'm taking that risk. It's not really worth it.
That is high risk, but they do offer some other ideas in the meantime. One is ocular massage, which is actually in the treatment algorithm for retinal artery occlusion. You can also do some drops to the eye to lower the pressure, which that does not have any devastating complications of bleeding to death. So are a couple of things you can do, but it is a time sensitive issue just as a stroke is. So
I think I'm on the other side of that one. Again, it's not like if they said there's a 100% chance you get full sight recovery, I'd contemplate it. If they're like, it might get a little better, but you might die, I'm like, not worth it for me.
All right, I'll take note of that for when you ever have a major vascular occlusion.
That's going to be on my...
If you have a vascular surgery problem, we can give you the clot busting drug in a catheter that drips it in. So you don't get the big dose, you get a little dose. So that decreases your risk of bleeding and dying.
All right. I might go with that one. Another case that I think is kind of very underserved here has been this law student who's popped up, maybe it was episode 2 or so. He came in very early, and he's basically been a prop in his own story. It was part of this overly aggressive security guard and the outcome, the fallout from that. And basically every single week he's there in the background and he's like a non-character. It's just an excuse to have conversations about other medical things. So in it, it's possible that they may have a conversation with him where he's conscious and they explain his situation to him. So that may yet come. But at this point, I still feel like he is like a prop in his own story, which is very strange. But we do see that the parents accepting this information, again, not the patient, but the parents are dealing with this. This is the trauma to the parents, which is very odd. But they do have this nurse, I believe she is, come down and explain that she had a daughter, 20 years old, who was in medical school, something similar to him.
She was studying like architecture at Georgetown.
Right, architect, right, correct.
And now she works at like a convenience store, and which just makes the parents of this kid who's in the ER just like look defeated. Like their high functioning son is going to be fine. Look, he can have a low level job and he'll be just as happy as he is now.
He can bag groceries. He'll be so happy. But you know what? Like they said, this is a new relationship with their son. So, I mean, we're making light of it here, but the reality is like, yeah, I mean, there are people out there who have, this is their life story, right? So
exactly. As long as you are alive to enjoy your existence, then it doesn't really matter what job you have.
Right. And yeah, and I mean, you still have you're still the same person minus you might have limitations in how being able to interact with other people, and the medication might make you too fuzzy to be able to focus on being an architect, for example. But it is unfortunate, but at least there's a ray of hope here, and they just have to accept this new limitation on their son, who was expected to be a straight A student and a lawyer. And of course, those dreams may have changed.
And there was a comment that 20% of patients who have their first like psychotic schizophrenic episode will recover. So they offer that statistic, like there's a 20% chance. And they don't see that as a positive. They see that as there's an 80% chance that he's not going to recover. But
now, this is me being really ignorant because I don't know these diagnoses, but I find it very interesting that they're like, he might be bipolar or he might be schizophrenic, which for me, again, this is just in popular consciousness, but I always think like someone who is schizophrenic has hallucinations and someone who's bipolar has like mood swings. So it's very odd that those are somehow correlated.
You can have bipolar with psychotic features. So I have a friend who was medicated appropriately for bipolar disorder for all of her life and then stopped her medication and had a psychotic break, which luckily resolved once she was back on her medication. So it's like bipolar with psychotic features.
A lot of check-ins. It's funny. I was like going down the list as we were watching this, just putting down the names of the patients and some other little moments of check-in. Just something character development wise. Maybe we can circle to those. But one is, I loved seeing McKay talking to Langdon about how was your recovery. And he's like, well, the first year they say is the toughest. And she's like, it is. I've been clean and sober for 9 years now. So he just kind of looks at her, and this kind of interesting thing that happens to, I think, to all of us in our friends groups, and of course with our coworkers, where sometimes you just suddenly know something about them that you didn't know before. And she's kind of like, oh, I didn't realize we had that in common. And maybe I can turn to her when I'm having a A tough day.
You see people in a different light when you start to learn about their personal experiences, because sometimes you're at work and you're just doing your job as the PA, as the nurse, as the woman who answers the phones, but there's people behind those job roles. So it's good to talk to your coworkers.
This is another fun character beat here, which is Joy in general in this episode, really stepping up. I loved seeing her. She has a photographic memory. The joke, of course, that, what's his name again? Whitaker. Yes. Whitaker took a picture, the blurry picture. I love when you snap a photo really quick and you're like, oh, by the way, everybody, if you have one of those live photos, if you've ever done this, if you have a blurry photo, you could change the key frame, smooth it out. But anyway,
he had his live photo turned off, maybe.
He might have had it turned off. That's very possible. But then it probably wouldn't be blurring. But regardless, the effect, the point of this was not to be like, oh, they're screwed. It's to show that Joy has secret talents that we haven't seen yet. And she's
memorized the entire board with the doctor, the problem, the location. It's very impressive. I've asked you before, Victor, if you have a photographic memory because you remember things that most human beings would not be able to keep in their mind. But in your case, it's not a photographic memory. No. It's just you put everything into a context that then you can bring back to the front of your mind.
Yes, I do not have a photographic memory at all. But you always say, like, you're always amazed that I'll remember the actual scene from a movie, like
that you haven't seen in 25 years.
Yeah, but then
completely insane.
But it's because in my mind, the way I pack everything away, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of this other thing. So then those memories are tied together. So then they're like grouped together, so I can kind of recreate the memory, but not with like I can't like look at a page of text and then close my eyes and be able to. I don't. Well, it's not visual.
Have no context for that.
But it's also not visual. Like that's the other thing. Like she obviously has, I don't know how photographic memory works, but she's recreating the image in her head so she can read the text. And that's not how this works for me. For me, it's like narrative. So it's like I can connect one narrative to another narrative, but it's not visual.
I basically think you're having a conversation with yourself all day long in your mind and connecting the dots of whatever it is you've seen, read, or heard so that then you can bring it back. Is that right?
Spoiler alert. We all have an internal conversation going in our heads all the time.
But your internal conversation is much different than most people's internal conversation.
Maybe because I'm just tying it all to narrative, but I think that it's the same thing everybody does. It's my process. This is my process.
Yes, I do have an internal monologue. That is true. But yours is sharper in terms of your memory.
But you remember cases from 20 years ago and you have these internal narratives. So you're doing the same thing.
My narratives are different than your narratives.
That's all I'm trying to say.
Makes so much sense.
We're all doing the same thing. It's just what we narrativize.
It's true. When I watch some of these scenes in ER, I'll be like, oh, 18 years ago, blah, 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 as if it just happened.
See, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Oh, and of course, one more thing about Joy and another highlight of moments here, and maybe speaking to her character development of her being like, I don't want to have anything to do with patients. And maybe part of the pivot here, and I was thinking about that today, if there is something happening here in the show, I wonder if Santos, who last year was just like, rah, 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 I love sticking my hand into a human body, wee. And now she's kind of being like, God, this is wearing me down. And Joy being like, I don't want to have anything to do with people. And over the course of the season, she becomes discovering that her skill set is more and more valuable, including her diagnosis this week, right? Where it's like, everyone's like, I think he's dying for this person who has this
terrible, terrible rash, this blistering rash on his legs and his face and his arms. And it turns out to be Margarita burn, phytophotodermatitis, which is something that exists. They have this terrible skin reaction by touching citrus in the sunlight, and it looks really disgusting on the show.
I was telling you this, but it's so funny. Every once in a while, randomly, I will get like blisters on the tips of my fingers and like little tiny blisters. But I never...
Victor is in the habit of making margaritas in the sun, obviously.
No, I was thinking about in the summer when it's hot, one of my go-to drinks is a gin and tonic. And I, am squeezing out the lime juice into the drink and probably getting that on my fingertips and then sitting in the sun and then getting these little tiny, I mean, these are tiny blisters, by the way. I've never seen blisters. Like this guy has, the blisters are like the size of a finger.
What we're going to do when the weather gets a little warmer.
Experiment.
Yeah, we're going to go outside with limes, squeeze them on your hands and put you in the sun and see what happens.
And I'll put it onto the podcast feed so we can all check in on it.
I'm sure your listeners will be very interested to see.
I'm going to create a social media account just to post the fingers of my burned fingers. Photos of my burned fingers. Okay, and turns out this deposition that we've been waiting for this whole entire is because of this
measles case.
The measles case from last year. They're bringing it full circle. This one of the most irritating characters from last year was this patient, the mother of this patient, who like refuses to, she's a RFK pilled and does not believe in doing anything. And what irony of ironies that this spinal tap may have caused some.
I mean, he has like a hypoxic brain injury because he was sick and he needed to be put on a ventilator. And now they're blaming the spinal tap, which has nothing to do with that. But of course, this woman who is an anti-vaxxer who doesn't want standard of care for her son just makes me so irate. And now the doctors are being punished for trying to do the right thing for the child. The dad agreed to the spinal tap while the mom was outside, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
The good news is these doctors aren't going down for this.
But what does the scene have to tell us here? She's getting a little pressured by this doctor.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. She says, we're not talking about the case. This is my monologue. Here's what's going on. I have a feeling it's just to put her mind at ease because she's so worked up over the deposition. But all of those facts are going to come out when, what's her name? The other doctor?
I forgot her name too.
Oh my God. When she's going to get questioned, she's just going to attest to what was in her notes from the ER visit. And my guess is like I just said, is to just try to relax her a little bit before these questions come.
But she seemed extra stressed out by having this. Oh, it's Dr. Melissa. But it seems like she seems stressed out after these interactions. She feels like that's not, my reading of it is that's not the story she wants to tell in a deposition. But what would she know about if there was any, it seems like maybe we didn't see it because we just heard that they did the spinal tap and then they got the results. But maybe something did happen during the spinal tap that she's afraid to talk about.
Not based on what that other doctor is telling her. The complication that they're upset about and the spinal tap are two separate issues. I watched the spinal tap. It looked like they got it right away. Spinal fluid was collected, done.
Oh, I remember that, right? Because that's right. She shows up, the mom shows up because I rewatched with you when you were binging the season 1, that the mom shows up as they're like basically have the tap in.
Yeah, and she's freaking
And
out.
Dr. Robbie's like, yeah, we're taking that right now. Like once they have actually drawn the spinal fluid. Oh, and by the way, I brought up last week, like, where's Digby? And we had even seen Digby like watching in the background. What was that? What did it have to do when they wheeled out Louis? And of course, it just turns out that he was paying his respects to Louis and that they had been on the street together at the same time. So they knew each other.
That was a little sweet scene. I liked it.
Yeah. So, that pays off as well. Okay. A couple characters that are pretty underserved here. One is Javadi here, who again, they've been developing. She's in this competition with Ogilvy, perhaps, and trying to decide what to do with her career. She's had some stuff to do here on the show, but again, especially in this episode, is just there. I like that when she shows up to see the Margarita burn patient, and her and Ogilvy are both confused as to how to diagnose. And this, of course, this competition they have. But I like the fact that she's like, I signed up for this patient. And he's like, but I have the chart.
Yeah, that was a nice comedic moment. They meet right in front of the patient's curtain and they're going at it.
And that is the process. And speaking of that, going back to the whole analog issue this episode, but like all these processes that people are screwing up, they are not pressing hard enough when or using a felt tip marker when they're filling in the chart.
They need a ballpoint marker so it goes through that triple paper copy.
That's right. You got to put everything on the same paper for a patient, or actually, no, you have to put it on separate, right? If you have a CT scan and some other thing, they needed to put it on 2 different charts. And they have these 2 nurses there who are...
Those are not nurses.
Oh, they're not.
No,
they're just...
they're like transporters or something that got slotted to be the paper pushers.
Yeah. So they're like, okay, I guess we're doing this now. So pretty funny. Are they part of the triage team? They're just like whoever's just available.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty funny. And that's the system as it is right now. And again, speaking of a really underserved character, this whole entire season, we have Mohan now has this conversation with Dr. Al because she's been giving this older patient what he wants, which is what is this patient again? They're paranoid that they have.
Yeah, he has a DVT, a clot in his leg, and he comes in and wants a D-dimer, but in fact, he just wants to like hang out with this doctor who's treated him before to tell her that he has made a social circle and he's out in the world like doing something for himself. So he just wants to socialize.
And then he probably decides that he's like, well, this is getting a little crowded here, maybe. And I've been here for a while, so maybe I don't get a lot of time with her one-on-one. But I guess this is part of where this is going this season, is that Dr. Al says to her, she's thinking, well, I don't know if I'm going to go to New Jersey now. My mom apparently doesn't need me to go there because she has like a new boyfriend. They were like on a cruise together and she seems to be just living her life. And the whole idea of her coming back to New Jersey doesn't seem to be pressing anymore. And Dr. Al says that she should go into geriatrics, I think because she's seeing the amount of time and care she has with this patient.
That could be. Her ideas for what field she wants to go into are quite variable and
She's
have
all over the place.
essentially nothing to do with one another. So, which is okay. You know, it takes a while to figure out what field of medicine to work in. That's why everyone should be a PA, because then you can change fields. If you don't like one, you can train in another.
And we need more what do you call those things?
Mid-levels.
Mid-levels. More mid-levels,
I love
people.
that term.
Kim's going
Not
to
on
get
the
you
bottom,
all to be
and
PAs.
not on the top. Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. Okay, some final observations that I thought are interesting for me is that I liked seeing what this here in the show, this explicitly done and now because of the analog systems. This show, by the way, is pretty conservative, and I don't mean politically conservative, but lowercase conservative in its perspective, that it's like, of course, structurally, it's this younger folks who are rolling in and the older people showing them the way. And it's so funny because, I work in technology and it's the exact opposite where, we have younger people coming in and we have older people who are like, I have managed this database for 35 years. And they're like, yeah, and you're doing it the way you did 35 years ago. And there's now like much easier ways to do this and all these system outages and stuff and then the new talent is saying like, oh, you don't have to do it that way anymore. Look, there's new stuff for years and years and years. And you probably have that experience of seeing older surgeons and younger surgeons. But this show, intentionally or not, because you have these younger doctors coming in and literally being trained by these older doctors, it very much is like, listen to your elders. They know better than you, especially when all the lights are out.
That is true. But that's why in academic medicine, we have conferences and the residents present new papers. It's basically to give the new data to the current ranks so we can all learn as we go.
Yeah, so the youngs do have sometimes things to teach the olds as well. Although on this show, it's always the other way around.
Except in the mass casualty event when the medical students were like, how about this? And the surgeons are thinking like, oh, well, I guess we could try that.
That was
Never thought of that.
That is a good point. Like when Giovanni basically usurps her mom and her mom's like, we need this. And she's like, no, or we get a tube out of there. And she's like, you can't do that. And she's like, Mom, it's a tube.
Yes. The younger generation's more creative.
Yeah, they're not as ingrained in their habits. Although they are definitely ingrained in their tech habits, which of course is what is coming unraveling here in this season of the show.
Which is why they're all going to have a meltdown with the senior level physicians pulling them off the floor.
What happens if there's some negative outcome because somebody does like a old school DIY test for something in this current circumstance, or because of some kind of emergency that occurs here in this particular case, a cyber attack? I don't know how this works. You probably don't know either, because I did talk to a few hospitals about cybersecurity back in the day. And I honestly don't know how that works. If there's a cyber attack and there's a bad medical outcome because of the cyber attack, because obviously if you buy cyber insurance, it protects you. Like if your patient records leaks, then you're protected, right?
Yeah, but not like a negative outcome from your lack of medical records or CAT scans or the speed at which you can make diagnoses.
So I honestly don't know how that works, but I'm just wondering if like they are all going to be open to a lot more lawsuits in a year after this, if patients get bad outcomes and it's related to the cyber attack, because then you could say, well, why wasn't your cybersecurity better?
That is interesting to see if that would come about.
We'll see the fallout from this season, because this is only one day, next season when the show comes back next January.
We'll see if there's more malpractice suits.
And now we're here in the mid-season of the show. And of course, you can include season 1, by the way. But I wanted to ask you, here we are, kind of at a very quiet moment here on the show itself. Do you think that this is not the question I was going to ask you, but I'll ask you a pre-question, which is, do you think that they have stopped diverting traffic to, now that all the hospitals are basically shut down tech-wise, that they've stopped diverting patients to this ER? Because this is pretty quiet as far as even new cases rolling in, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of people in the waiting room still, but it does appear that they're not flooding this one particular hospital.
They have 8 doctors treating that one patient.
I know. That obese man who needs to get a body weight before a CAT scan, like the whole staff of the show, is like, ooh, we're putting a tube into his nose.
Let's all sit here and watch. We have nothing else to do.
Yeah, so clearly they're not overwhelmed with patients at the moment.
But the main question I was going to ask you is, you can pick from this season or next season, or the previous season, I should say. What do you think is the most realistic and surprising to you? Like, I never expected they would show that in a TV series and kind of go into that level of detail that impressed you in that way, or if you can answer both of these if you want to, the most ridiculously unrealistic. Maybe it's the 8 doctors putting in a tube in someone's nose.
Yeah, this storyline with like the amount of staff and the degree of what they're doing for just measuring his body weight, that's just silly. So that's the one thing that I didn't love about this episode. I think it was the first episode of this season when the guy comes in and he needs an ER thoracotomy. The treatment algorithm that they went through for doing an emergency thoracotomy was spot on. And it also, like, the visuals of this patient's open chest were also very realistic.
Oh, I didn't even know what you were talking about there, but the clamshell, the opening of the chest. But now that you say that, like, what? And that was amazing. Yeah,
I've never done an ER thoracotomy, but like they went through like the textbook way of how you do it. I mean, there's a lot of things that are really spot on with this show. That one struck a chord.
And one more thing you said, unrealistic this week, I just remembered, but and I didn't question you about it in the moment because I was going to save it for the conversation here. But when Santos gives the injection into this, what do they call it? A spot injection?
Trigger point.
You said you were like, that would never happen.
I mean, the ER doctors would never take the time to do a trigger point injection. It's just not an ER provider function. It's like, oh, you have muscular neck pain. Here's some anti-inflammatories.
Get out of here.
Ciao.
Yeah. And if it's still bad, then go see somebody about getting an injection. Oh, and by the way, anybody who's seen this, if you didn't stick around for the end, usually there's only a trailer, but every once in a while they put a little featurette in there, and I do always check. And a very cool one this week, and it made me appreciate this show, the technical complexity of making this show, which the fact that they built this set, they obviously wanted this thing to be long running. They built the set in the round, basically, like they have the nurse's desk. And even though it's interesting, I never thought about this, even though you could imagine it being like there's the nurse's desk and this is like, laid out in a square, which maybe is the geography we're supposed to imagine. And they might have even shown it on the board that way, but actually it's all in the round. So you have these ability of the camera literally to go around in a circle and you can see all the operating rooms,
trauma rooms,
I should say. And so that you can see basically from any one point in the location, you can see any other location, which allows them to shoot on the fly constantly. The camera is just, it's a steady cam, just moving all the time, and very cool to see them actually doing this. But what I didn't think about is traditionally, even when you watch a show like ER, you're at the nurse's station and it's like the doctor's talking to the nurse, and then you're inside of one of the ER rooms and you're talking to the patient, and everything's being shot independent of each other.
Yeah. And the way they have this show set up is that you have multiple things going on simultaneously. So when the camera happens to catch a background shot or moves to follow a doctor as they're walking, you're getting what's going on with other characters on the show that you'll then see in greater detail. But the way they're filming it is to make it look like this is really how an ER would be running, which I loved seeing that.
And it's so cool when you just think about this show was designed from day one to be a long running show. And when they announced that last January, the show premiered and we're going to get a season 2 this January, and they're already starting season 3, and we're going to get it next January, and this is going to run every year, just like old school TV. I'm like, well, of course they can do this because they have one set, everybody's on set, and the camera's just roving around. But what I didn't think about is this extra technical hurdle they've given themselves, and they showed these examples of it, which again, this is happening subconsciously. I didn't even connect the dots here, but it's so cool that when they're talking to one doctor outside and that storyline somehow is tied into something that's happening in like this other storyline, and like it's happening over their shoulder. But of course, they shot the surgery in that room separate with the doctor sitting at the nurse's desk. And then we see the shot from the nurse's desk into the operating room.
Yeah,
so they have to shoot it twice because now they have to like match the action. And the way they do this, by the way, is so cool. The way they do this is they have the script in one column with timestamps in it. And on the left-hand side, the director goes in, or him with his team, they go in and they put choreography in. So the point is that you're going to shoot the same scene from outside of the operating room, from inside the operating room. You might have to shoot the same minute of the show from minute X to minute Y, that 5 minutes. You might have to shoot it from 8 different perspectives, but everybody has to do whatever they were doing in those minutes in all their separate rooms so that whenever they cut from one point of view to the other, that everything is in match. And I'm like, wow, that is so cool.
The amount of coordination it's taking to make this show is incredible. And yeah, it goes off so seamlessly that you don't even think about it. But when they break it down, it makes you appreciate it.
It's like doing, like we saw Sleep No More. And you think about the fact that when you're watching that everybody's performing the same story over and over again. And then the audience is walking around. And that's basically what's happening here. Everybody's doing this 1 hour of the show in real time in all those separate rooms all the time. And then sometimes the camera is there and sometimes it's not. But when the camera is not there, you still have to do everything you did last time because the shots have to match when you cross cut. And I'm like, wow, that is so cool. And it's invisible. It's so well done that I've never even thought about it until this moment.
Nope, I never gave it a thought.
Yeah, so it's so cool. And speaking of that, they bring up another thing I never think about, but there are over and over again in this show, someone is like laying in a gurney, grabbing the doctor's sleeve and being like, hey, when are you going to see me? When are you going to see me? And they just sit there. And then in episode 10, they suddenly get seen by the doctor. But guess what? Again, think about the scenario I just described, where everybody's on the set at all times performing their part over and over again. This show is being shot over the course of months. This 15 episodes.
You have the people in the waiting room sitting there for 3 weeks.
Sitting there for weeks and weeks and weeks on their gurney, playing the same scene over and over again until they finally get to be seen by the doctor and have a line of dialogue. And those extras have to sit in those gurneys for weeks. In the same clothes.
Or in the waiting room for weeks.
Yes.
They must have multiple outfits that are the same.
It must be, right? You can just get everything from like the Gap, but just get 3 or 4 versions of it. I just wear the same clothes all the time, so need to.
We should put you on a TV show as an extra.
I'm preparing for that very day. Yep. So then we will see where we go next week. The trailer didn't seem to show anything too amazing. We do see our first fireworks injury here, I think.
Oh, yes. It appears to be a child with a hand injury.
Unfortunately, but we will see. And we're more than halfway through. Stupid kids. I mean, I can't believe we didn't blow up our fingers off so many times when I was a kid and we used to be the idiots around 4th of July.
I know. Teenagers are total idiots. And it's surprising that we've all made it to adulthood.
How did we survive? I think about that all the time.
I know. And just wait for our children to be teenagers.
It's right around the corner. All right, Kim, thank you again for our conversation.
Anytime, Victor.
Oh, on the podcast, by the way, DTF St. Louis is premiering this Sunday. The reviews have come in. They are pretty strong. Murder mystery / marital strife. As I told Sona when I suggested the show to her, I'm like, this is our brand. Whether it's White Lotus or Your Friends and Neighbors, or now, here we go. We have a dead body and we have marital problems. This is our podcast brand. So here we go. We're back with another one. And the reviews are good. Jason Bateman and this one. David Harbour as well, and Linda Cardellini, speaking of ER. And in Paradise, of course, we just covered the first 3 episodes of Paradise. Our highest download episode of the podcast in probably 6 or 7 months, even bigger than Pluribus's premiere, which was huge for us. Because, of course, Paradise is, for some reason, folks, I would love to hear from all of you out there who are tuning in just for the Paradise coverage. Like, why this show? Because, not to be critical of it, obviously, but because if we could figure out what that formula is, I would cover more shows like that, because the downloads have been very strong for Paradise so far. So we will continue to watch that, of course. Darren is back from his vacation. Oh, and Industry, of course, wraps up this same Sunday night as the DTF St. Louis is also on HBO. So, of course, the finale of Industry, we're in episode 4, already halfway because of that 3-episode drop of Paradise. We'll be halfway through the season. Darren will be back on the pod. Sona's back on the pod. And Kim, of course, you and I will continue to cover this show. And then I'm trying to find a show for us to cover afterwards. So we'll see if...
So I can continue my potting.
But only if the audience likes you.
True.
I thought you were going to beg for...
No. I won't beg your audience.
All right. Thank you, Kim, for the conversation.
You're welcome. See you soon.
Hey, bye, everybody.